everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. If you're new here, my name's Melanie. Welcome. And for my returning art and craft friends, I'm so glad you're taking another creative break with me today. Today I'm going to be crafting, not painting, but I'm going to be showing you how I created this cute little whimsical pumpkin witch rusty gal. I'm going to be showing you step by step of how I created her. Now I'm going to be sewing a little bit today, and I'm very much a beginner sewer, but I wanted to share with you, you don't have to be perfect to do something fun like these little prim crafts. That's why the prim characters suit me so well. They're very artsy, craftsy, and they don't have to be perfect, and you can create something really cute too. I wanted to give you a gift today. If you wanted to go over to my Ko-fi shop, there's a clickable link down inside of the description box, and you can grab the pattern that I created for my pumpkin gal. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration. We have 3 hosts today. Let's share the information about them. You definitely want to check out their channels because they are super creative. And there's a playlist for all of the other people who are participating in today's collaboration. Playlists are great because all you have to do is click that playlist button and they roll one after another after the another. Well, let's go ahead and share the information for today's collaboration.
Today's hosts are Monica with Up All Night DIY, Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling, and Shelly with Repurposed My Way. You're going to find the links to their channels inside of the description. Go ahead and click their links and click that playlist to watch all the rest of the creatives for today. My prim character is going to be sitting in some sort of metal can. I was deciding which one to use. I did end up going with the larger tomato can. I have my pattern here, which I drew on paper first, and then I copied it out on a cardstock, so it was a little bit firmer to be able to do the tracing. Once I have it all cut out, I just put it down on my muslin fabric. I'm just using a very inexpensive muslin fabric. I don't go with the super expensive, kind of more of a mid-price. I'm going to be using a friction pin. Friction pins are great for doing this type of tracing because afterwards you can just use a little bit of heat from your heat tool or a blow dryer and it'll erase the line. It's like invisible ink in the end. If you'd like the free pattern for this, just go ahead and click that link inside of the description box and it'll take you right over to my Ko-fi shop, and there you can find the free tracer there. After tracing my pieces, I use some straight pins and attach the 2 layers of fabric together. Once I have it attached, I go ahead and just do a rough cut around each piece. I don't want to cut it on the lines. That's where I'm going to be sewing. Then once I have my rough cuts all the way around my pieces, I go ahead and take them to my sewing machine and do my simple, but not perfect, sewing. When sewing my pieces together, for the pumpkin gal, I'm creating a pillow style. So I want to leave an opening at the bottom so I can stuff her. For the rim of the hat, I just completely sew it all the way shut. Once I have my pieces all stitched around, I need to go ahead and cut out my pattern pieces. I'm creating an edge of no larger than 1/4 inch. I want to be able to go ahead and clip these tiny little pieces all the way around, especially in the areas that bend. By allowing this is just going to help the fabric turn and curve so much better when I turn my pieces right side out. Be careful when you're doing this step so you're not clipping your stitches at all, but if you do happen to clip them, just re-sew the edge and you'll be fine. I did the clipping process to both of my pieces, and now I'm ready to turn them the right side out. I found if I go ahead and stick my thumb all the way through, gather up my fabric to the end, and then bring it back through, that worked the easiest. Although that witch hat did have a lot of little bends and it does curve, so I ended up using the back end of a pencil with the eraser and use that to poke it through. I didn't want to use anything too sharp by poking it that way, so I wouldn't go all the way through my fabric. But in the end, at the very tip of my witch hat, to get it a little bit more pointed, I took a straight pin and just pulled the fabric out from the little creases, and that worked pretty well. To stuff my pieces this time, I ended up using a polyfill that I purchased at Joann Fabrics. I really like how this ended up packing my piece, and I'll definitely use this again. The key to stuffing is make sure that you use small pieces when doing this. I did end up using a hemostat. I know, a hemostat, right? A fancy word for a little bit of a pinchers to go in and get my tiny little pieces all the way to the end of my witch hat. You could possibly do this with the end of your pencil as well, but the hemostat worked really well to do this task. Once I have the majority of my piece stuffed, I like to go ahead and give it a little bit of a massage. It just helps push that stuffing around and my piece will be a lot smoother in the end. The can I chose to put my pumpkin piece in is about 4.5 inches tall and about 4 inches wide. I like using those can openers that create the rolled edge. By using that, you're not going to end up with a sharp edge. No way to cut yourself. It's a great tool. I think I bought mine at Walmart. I was going to take this outside to spray it. I'm going to be using this spray paint in black matte finish. It works great for this process. And then just a little bit of cinnamon from my local Dollar Tree. I took it outside because spray paint really does need to be done in a well-ventilated area. When doing this process, you want to go ahead and spray this on, hold that trigger down, and get quite a bit of spray paint on there. I realized I forgot my gloves. Definitely use gloves when doing this so you don't get paint all over your hands. Once you have a really nice wet surface, go ahead and put a lot of cinnamon on. You're not going to knock this off. You're going to let it dry fully covered. So go ahead and use a generous amount of cinnamon for this type of step. And then just continue around your can until your can is covered with paint and cinnamon. And let it dry for about an hour, maybe even 2, depending on your weather. To finish the closure of my pumpkin gal, I used a little bit of white thread and just did a whip stitch at the bottom, tucking my fabric in just to close it off so my stuffing would stay put. I'm going to paint my pieces with some craft paint. Just choose a black, whatever you might have. I'm going to add about maybe a quarter 50-cent piece size of paint in there, and then I added some water to thin it down. This will really help the paint glide across easier on your fabric. And if you are doing stitch work, a thinner paint is easier to stitch through than a thicker layer of paint. I forgot to go ahead and erase my lines, so I quickly used my heat tool to erase any pen marks that might be still there. When doing this black paint, you do want to make sure that you're not getting black paint everywhere. You're using thin layers of paint. They are going to be translucent slightly. So make sure your gloves are dry. Mine look a little messy, but they're actually dry. And then the paper underneath, it was dry when I began. I don't want black paint on my area where I'm going to be painting orange for my face of my pumpkin. Go ahead and paint your black. Make sure you're getting your seams on everything that you're doing and go all the way around your piece. Do this to the brim piece as well. Once I had my black area done, I went ahead and gave it a quick dry because I'm going to be doing some sanding on my piece. I used some 220 grit sandpaper and sanded my black. Now you want to be careful when you're doing this. Too much sanding, you're going to make a hole in your piece, especially around where you've sewn it. But this just really does soften the fibers of the fabric and creates a very interesting look for your piece. Do that on your brim as well, both sides of your brim. I used burnt orange from the Americana Deco paint. I did the same process, added some paint, add a little water, and thin it down. I used a flat brush up against the black area to create my edge. I used the chisel edge, which means sideways, and I just went right up to my black area and painted my line. Now because your paint is thinned down, it may look a little splotchy, but that's okay. These prim pieces really do look primitive, and that just adds the extra character. So don't feel like your paint has to be perfect when doing this step. After painting my orange, I dried it quickly with my heat tool and gave it a little massage before I began the sanding process. I used the 220 grit sandpaper again, and I sanded it one direction and then turned it the other way and sanded the opposite direction. By doing it this way, it just gives your fabric a beautiful brushed fabric look. After the sanding, I went ahead and mixed up a little bit of coffee stain. I used a half a cup of water with a whole tablespoon of the instant coffee. I went ahead and applied this coffee stain all over my piece, just using a simple little chip brush. After my pieces were covered with my coffee stain, I used my heat tool again and just dried my pieces. You could also leave them outside if you had extra time. Once the coffee stain is dried, it gives your piece a beautiful aged look, but I wanted to do one last sanding on my piece, just to bring up that brushed fabric look again. Make sure you're doing this lightly so you don't burnish any holes in your fabric. Up next is some of the stitching steps. I'm going to be creating a whip stitch pattern all the way around my hat brim. I like using the Aunt Lydia's crochet thread for all of my needlework on my prims. I like the idea that it's cotton, so it's a matte finish. It will take a coffee stain quite easily if you need to in the end, and I do that for my eyes on this project. The number 10 weight is the thread weight that I like to use for this process. I bought mine at Joann Fabric. They only had a limited supply of colors at my local store, but I know you can order it online. Up next was a little bit of cutting. Once I had my brim all done with the whip stitch all around the edges, I folded it in half and then cut the slit that I'm going to be sliding it over the top of my witch hat. When you're doing this step, make sure you're not cutting too far into your piece. You can always make the slit longer if you need to. You just can't undo it once it's done. I got pretty lucky with mine. My cut was just pretty much right away. So I slid it on and just kind of folded it and bended it, and I thought it looked good. I'm going to be gluing this piece on to attach it. For the patterns of the face, I went ahead and created a triangle for the nose. This piece will be included in the free pattern if you decide to grab that tracer over on my Ko-fi page. There's a clickable link inside of the description if you would like to have it. Once I placed my nose down, this was just a great way to be able to figure out how big I wanted to make my nose. I traced around it with my pencil. In the end, you really don't notice the pencil marks at all. To do the stitching for my nose, I'm going to be using the black crochet thread for this too. I'm also going to be using a 5-inch doll needle. I purchased mine at Walmart. These are super handy when doing these little primitive dolls. They allow you to be able to go from the back of your head to the front and then be able to do your stitching without losing your needle inside of your item. To begin stitching the nose, I center it right on the back of my head and I go from the back to the front to the top of my triangle is what I'm going for. So that extra long needle really does help. You can push it through, feel with your fingers, and be able to tell when you're at the top of your triangle. Pull it all the way through. You don't need to add a knot at this stage. You're just going to pull it through and leave a little tail. In the end, we'll be making a knot at the back. To begin making the nose, once you're at the top, you're going to follow your pencil line on your triangle and go under and up to create a little stitch on the side. You don't want it to be overly long, but you don't need them super small either. So you're going to pull your thread out. And then once you have that there, you're going to come across to the other side of your triangle line where you have drawn, and you're going to do another under and up stitch. When going under, you're not going so deeply, you're just kind of catching your fabric and not a lot of the stuffing underneath. You're just going to continue that pattern all the way down your pencil line. It's rather like creating a ladder over and across patterns. I'll go ahead and speed this up so you can watch the stitching process, but once we get down to the bottom, we'll work our way back up the nose, filling in any extra areas that we might want to add a few more stitches. Once you reach the top, go ahead and take your needle and go right out the back hole where you came through and tie a little knot. Let's begin the eyes. We're going to come right through the back, the same hole we did the nose through, and start there. I like a little bit of a look of a wide centered eye, so I'm going to take my needle, wiggle it through the back, and then come out at the far side of my eye. Use your finger over the top. You can tell where your needle is there. Go ahead and pull that out. Again, not all the way through. I'm not going to tie a knot yet. I'm just pulling it through, leaving a little tail, and then coming across to see how large I want my eye. You're going to go underneath your fabric. Oh, here I am measuring it a little bit. I'm coming across, trying to get an idea of somewhat straight. Coming underneath my fabric, and then coming out on the other side to the similar length of where I started. I'm new at this, so it does take me a little bit longer to do this, but I can see that once you've had plenty of practice doing it over and over again, you're going to feel more confident doing this. I'm going to put about 5 stitches down, and I'm not making them super close because I found that if you go 5 stitches about all the way down, about the same length. It just is a little easier. If you start doing them all at once, they get narrower and narrower and sometimes a little bit more wonky. So by doing 5 stitches down and then coming back up like I did for the nose and filling in the gaps, it just makes it so much easier. Once you reach the top, you can take your needle, go back through the same hole, and then tie a little knot. And then you begin the process all over again, going back through the back hole and then starting on the other side and creating another eye. In the end, my eyes ended up being 2 different sizes, but I'm okay with that. I like that primitive look, that artistic, kind of wonky look. I'm 100% okay with that. So I just finished up my eye, going through the back and tying a knot. And up next is we're going to make the dark part of the eye. Once again, I'm starting from the back and then working my way to the front. The black parts of the eyes are going to be up and down, so I don't want to cover all of the white. I'm going to be starting a little off to the center and then just doing the same way I did the whites of the eyes. I'm going to do that same way for the black. So I'm not trying to make it perfect right away. I'm going to be doing about 3 stitches and then coming back in with another 2 to fill in my spots. Once I have that eye complete, I can take my needle and I can keep it inside of my head and go all the way across to my next eye. One of the advantages of using the doll needle, it's long enough to do this process. So I don't have to go back out if I don't want to. I can just come right underneath and continue on with my next eye. Again, I'm going to be doing 3 stitches and then going back and filling in those areas. Once I finished my eye area, I had enough string left on my needle that I went from the top and I went right to the center of the bottom of my nose to be able to create my jack-o'-lantern smile. I'm going to be creating V shapes across my little jack-o'-lantern. Once I pull my thread out, I put it to an angle to see how long I want to make my jack-o'-lantern smile. Once I reach the bottom, I go under my fabric at an angle and then pull it up. This is going to create my first little V stitch. So once I'm there, I come back down and connect my stitch. And then instead of going across sideways, I go over, come out on the side, go back and connect my stitch, and come across the top. And then come down one more time to connect my stitches. And then once I have that area, I go down there and then I come back up to my original area to connect all of my stitches. And then once I have it pulled through the original area, I'm going to create the smile on the other side. So first you do one side and then you do the next. Once your jack-o'-lantern smile is complete, go to the back and make a knot. I did decide he needed some eyebrows, so I did go back through and created eyebrows at a slant over each of the eye. I wanted to deepen that color of the thread, so I took a little bit of my coffee stain and colored in the thread area. I wanted to add a little bit over the nose, and then I used my heat tool to go ahead and dry that. It just really did add another layer of rusticness and primitive look to my little guy. Now it's time to finish up that texture on that can. It's had plenty of time to dry, and I'm just going to use a chip brush and just brush that cinnamon off. Make sure you have something underneath to catch it, because whatever's left over you can just put right back into your cinnamon container. Now let's put this little happy guy together. I went ahead and slid his little hat over the top, and I decided I would just go ahead and tack it with glue, a little bit of the Eileen's clear glue, and I put a little bit underneath the top, and I put a little bit on the back as well. Held it for just a few moments and it was stuck pretty well. Super cute, right? To cover up where the hat brim touched together, I used a little bit of creepy cloth that I had stained with coffee stain earlier, and I thought it just finished it off really nice. I put a little hot glue just to hold it. I don't like to see a lot of hot glue, so I'm kind of very careful when I use the hot glue. And then I used some of the darker Excelsior. It works perfect for these little prim pieces. I made little bundles and then attached a couple on each side. just to finish it off and make it look like it kind of had a little bit of, I don't know, maybe some hair or some pumpkin funness, I guess. And then I took a little bit of a button and put it on the top. And I used a little bit of the coffee stain just to darken that button up and to age the thread a little bit too. I like all the little extra details. Now to put my little guy in the can. To take up a little space, I put a little bit of styrofoam in the bottom, added some glue, and just glued it in. The styrofoam took up enough space on the bottom to make him the correct height. Now I needed to add a little bit more stability all the way around. So I took some lunch sacks and I just crumpled them up and pushed the paper in around to make him a little bit more stable. Once he was stable, I took some more of the little creepy cloth that I had used around the top of his hat and glued a little bit of that around of the can inside, adding some in the front and some from the back. I wasn't for sure how I was going to display this guy, so I thought I would add it all the way around. As the final embellishment to the top of the can, I took some of the Excelsior, made little bundles, and put those around the can as well. I want to say a special thank you to Dawn, Monica, and Shelly for putting together this fun Rust-A-Wing collaboration. You're going to want to check out the links to their channels inside of my description box, and definitely take a little time and watch the playlist. I'm sure you'll be inspired to create something fun for your home. I had one more element I wanted to add to my can before I called it done. I had purchased some fabric from my local Joann Fabrics, coffee stained it, and then I baked it in my oven for a while to even give the fabric a more primitive look. I wanted to create just a simple little knot in the front, so I just folded it over and added a little bit of hot glue to make sure it was secure. I had a little tag in my stash already that had been coffee stained and inked, and I used some stamps and wrote the words "fall" on there. I attached it with a safety pin. It's not a rusty safety pin, but that would be a good idea. But I used one that I had from Tim Holtz. Well, let's see what this guy looks like displayed with some of the other primitive crafts I've made on my channel. If you like to do art and crafts and you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. Ring that bell so you get notifications of any new videos that I might put up. Give me a thumbs up if you like this primitive craft idea. Leave me a comment. I'd like to know if you like to do prims. If you like to do art, I have lots of drawing and painting tutorials. You might want to go check those out. Well, hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.